Sergeant Jake Morrison had seen plenty of impossible things during his 3 years stationed on the border world of Kepler 442b, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of Princess Lirelei of the Velthari Empire hanging upside down from a crashed escape pod. Her luminescent silver hair creating an ethereal waterfall in the alien jungle's purple twilight. The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 6 hours when Jake's patrol finally traced it to the dense Shadow Grove forest. What he'd expected to find was another smuggler's vessel, or maybe some unlucky prospectors. What he definitely hadn't expected was royalty. "Are you injured, Your Highness?" Jake asked in carefully practiced Velthari as he worked to free her from the tangled safety harness. His standard-issue translation implant handled most languages, but diplomatic protocol demanded he at least attempt the princess's native tongue. Princess Lirelei's large violet eyes, each easily twice the size of human eyes, focused on him with obvious surprise. "You speak our language," she said, her voice carrying the musical harmonics that made Velthari speech sound like singing. "And you know who I am." Jake carefully supported her as she dropped from the wreckage, noting how her skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light, a trait he'd read about, but never seen in person. The Velthari were among the most beautiful species in the known galaxy, and their royal bloodline was said to be especially ethereal. "Military briefings, ma'am. Your diplomatic convoy was reported missing 3 days ago." He scanned the jungle around them with his rifle's scope. "We need to move. This area isn't secure, and whoever shot down your pod might still be hunting." As if summoned by his words, the distinctive whine of Karath raider vehicles echoed through the forest. Jake's blood ran cold. The Karath were notorious pirates who specialized in capturing high-value targets for ransom, or worse. "Can you run?" he asked urgently. Lirelei nodded, though Jake noticed her favoring her left leg. Without hesitation, he scooped her up in his arms, ignoring her startled gasp. "Faster this way," he explained, already moving toward the extraction point he'd radioed to his unit. For the next 4 hours, Jake carried the princess through increasingly dangerous terrain while staying ahead of their pursuers. His enhanced human physiology, a standard military modification, allowed him to maintain a punishing pace, even with her weight, but the Karath were persistent and knew the jungle better than he did. The real test came at Razor Falls, a 100-meter waterfall that marked the boundary of human territory. Jake could hear the raider vehicles getting closer, their engines growing louder by the minute. "There's no way across," Lirelei whispered, staring at the churning rapids below. Jake looked at the crude rope bridge spanning the gorge, old, frayed, and definitely not designed to hold 2 people. "Yes, there is." Before she could protest, he was carrying her onto the swaying bridge. Halfway across, the ancient ropes began to snap. Jake felt the structure giving way beneath them and made a split-second decision that would have gotten him court-martialed under different circumstances. He threw the princess toward the far side of the gorge. Lirelei's scream cut through the air as she sailed across the gap, landing hard but safely on solid ground. Jake, meanwhile, plummeted toward the rapids below. The impact with the water should have killed him. The rocks should have finished the job. But human military modifications weren't just for show, and Jake's reinforced skeleton, an enhanced cardiovascular system, kept him alive long enough to wash up on a muddy bank 3 kilometers downstream. He awoke to find Princess Lirelei kneeling beside him, her hands glowing with soft blue light, as she performed some kind of healing technique on his injuries. Tears, actual tears, were streaming down her luminescent cheeks. "You sacrificed yourself for me," she whispered. "You could have died." Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Part of the job, ma'am. Protecting civilians." "I am not a civilian," she said firmly. "I am royalty." "And you are." She paused, studying his face with those enormous violet eyes, the most honorable being I have ever encountered." That was 3 weeks ago. Now Jake stood in the medical bay of the Valthari diplomatic vessel, having been treated like honored royalty since his rescue. His injuries had healed completely thanks to advanced alien medicine, and he'd been expecting orders to return to his unit any day. What he hadn't been expecting was Princess Lirelei entering his room dressed in formal ceremonial robes, accompanied by what appeared to be her entire royal guard. "Sergeant Morrison," she began formally, then switched to perfect English. Apparently, she'd been practicing. "I have a proposition for you." Jake straightened to attention. "Yes, ma'am?" "Marry me." The words hung in the air like a detonated grenade. Jake's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound emerged. What? Among my people, when someone saves a royal family member's life through personal sacrifice, it creates a bond called the Kithara, a debt that can only be repaid through the highest honor our society can offer. She stepped closer, her expression earnest. "Marriage to royalty." "Your Highness, I'm flattered, but—" "You don't understand," she interrupted, her cheeks darkening with what Jake was learning to recognize as a Valthari blush. "This isn't just about honor or duty. During those hours, you carried me through the jungle. During the moment you threw yourself into that gorge to save me, I felt something I've never experienced before." Jake stared at her, his military training completely failing to provide guidance for this situation. "Princess, we barely know each other. We're different species. The cultural implications alone. Are you saying no?" Her voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the confident royal he'd first met. Jake looked into those remarkable violet eyes and saw not a princess or an alien, but simply someone who had chosen to be vulnerable with him. Someone who had sat by his bedside for days, learning his language just to better communicate with him. "I'm saying," he replied carefully, "that maybe we should start with dinner and see where things go from there." Princess Lirelei's face lit up with a radiance that had nothing to do with her natural luminescence. "Is that a yes to courtship?" Jake found himself smiling, despite the impossibility of it all. "Yes, Your Highness." "That's a yes." Later, when asked by military intelligence how exactly he'd managed to accidentally become engaged to alien royalty, Jake would simply explain that sometimes the best missions were the ones that chose you. And sometimes, the most impossible love stories started with the simplest act of doing what was right. In a universe of infinite possibilities, love remains the most miraculous force of all.